Joining me now, the Senior Fellow for Middle Eastern Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, Ed Hussein. Mr. Hussein, thank you for joining us.
Trace, thank you for having me.
So we asked for a list from Syria, and surprise, surprise, we get it in the nick of time. But as Jonathan said, we don't know if this is the whole list. We have no way to verify exactly what they have or if what they turned over is all they have.
That's entirely true. But the difficulty, of course, is imagine the alternative situation in which we're not engaged with Assad and his henchmen, however much we detest them, and we end up bombing Syria, we end up spreading these harmful toxins, we end up weakening a regime in which he's replaced by supporters of Al-Qaeda, and these weapons find themselves in the hands of people who are much more despicable than he is. So the process, however flawed it is, and the risk of the cat and mouse game that Saddam Hussein played in the past, in this place of imposing sanctions, have diplomacy in place, of having inspectors going into the facilities that we at least have some idea of where they are, and then apply greater pressure on him and then make sure he doesn't use these weapons again, rather than bomb him and exaggerate the risk of him using those weapons again on the battlefield as he's done before.
And you bring up a very good point about Assad possibly losing power, because now we have a situation in Syria where you have rebels fighting rebels. I mean, there's a war within a war, and there's these multitude of groups within the rebels who have now vowed allegiance to Al-Qaeda. I mean, what happens in that scenario if Al-Qaeda becomes bigger, bolder, and stronger because of this new allegiance of rebels?
Trace, you're absolutely right, and that's what we're seeing play out inside Syria on a daily basis, that the secular so-called mainstream fighters are losing ground. Where they gain ground, they can't hold ground, whereas the Al-Qaeda fighters are much more vicious. They have a religious hierarchy. They seem to be delivering for people on the ground. They have links to Gulf countries where there's money flowing in, and in a country where many of the fighters are mercenaries, are happy to take money from the highest bidder. Al-Qaeda and its affiliate, the local affiliate Jabhat al-Nusra, has been successful in recruiting people who see results happen. In other words, these are ruthless fighters, unlike the Free Syrian Army that's not as ruthless. They have a vision that's clear as to the kind of deadly, literalist, Sharia-oriented state that they want to create after Assad is gone. The Free Syrian Army isn't necessarily clear what he wants to create. But I wouldn't be too worried about Al-Qaeda and its affiliates gathering inside Syria, because one of the options that has not been put on the public debate, at least as clearly as it has done, say, in Yemen or in Pakistan, is the possibility of using drone attacks to identify and eliminate Al-Qaeda hotbeds. That can be done, but that should not be our major fear, although it's legitimate to think about the mood music which Al-Qaeda plays, and therefore others who are less extreme than Al-Qaeda taking power. Let's not imagine for a moment that we'll see Al-Qaeda in the presidential palace in Damascus. That won't happen. But people who have sympathies with them, there's a risk that that may happen in Assad's fall. And worse, I think, the onslaught against Christians and Druze and Alawi minority communities, which is a real risk of a genocide against minority religious communities inside Syria.
Yeah, and I got to go, but sectarian violence, you're saying regardless of what happens diplomatically or what happens with Assad, there will be sectarian violence and conflict inside Syria, right?
For years to come, sadly, for years to come. This is just the beginning of a new civil war that can take many years to unfold.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Ed Hussein. Good of you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Trace, for having me.